Hey, 7.1, the causes of the French Revolution. We're going to go through this pretty quickly because I'm going to give you some additional materials that you can check out and get other perspectives. John Green, what's his face? Oh, yeah, Tom Ritchie, and some other things that you can look at to get a little bit more perspective. So we're going to go through the causes here fairly quickly. You see the Christmas tree back there? It's almost Christmas time. And Harold Porter, Harry Potter, on the TV. So menu, there's that. You can read it and pause it and copy it down if you'd like. I'll go ahead and start. France in 1789. We looked at the Enlightenment. We looked at the intellectual growth of that period. It's going to be important now to see practically how that makes a difference. And France is the place where it's going to be the largest difference. Now, we need to understand France, the three estate system, clergy, nobility, everyone else. Why do you want to be in the first and second estate? They don't pay taxes. Third estate does. That is the key difference, right? Now, doesn't mean that there's no wealth in the third estate. We've got a bourgeoisie, the middle class, but for the most part, most of the wealth per capita proportionally is certainly in the first and second estate. Increasing debt and financial problems, wars, including, big point here, including the activity of the French in the American Revolution, helping to further deepen the problems that France has financially. The Enlightenment, encouraging the discussion of political freedoms. Perhaps the king is not the best model. A monarchy is not the best model for France. Perhaps there's another way we could do government. The encouragement is, or the Enlightenment is encouraging those things. You have absolute poor leadership from Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. We'll look more at that in a second. And then something that gets a lot of underplay but is important is that by 1789 you've had 2 summers with poor harvests for wheat. And what that does is it decreases the wheat supply, therefore decreasing the supply of bread. Demand is always high for bread. Supply goes down, demand stays the same, your price goes up. So it's something to consider as well. Now, France in the 18th century. With Louis XIV, at the end of the 17th century and the early 18th century, France was number 1. But they are now challenged. It's the home of the Enlightenment. And it's intellectually buzzing, but politically it's struggling. And a lot of it's to do with ineffective rulers. Louis XV, you met him at the Salon. Vain, spends the money and perpetuates issues with debt, gets France involved in many wars, including the French and Indian War against England, which ends terribly for the French as they lose all their colonies in North America. This is a difficult situation, to be sure. Louis XVI, his grandson, marries Marie Antoinette, an Austrian princess. That's significant because traditionally Austria is an enemy of France. But now it seems that perhaps France and Austria are getting together a lot, but people are still going to doubt this Austrian princess. And is she best for Louis? And is she best for France as queen? They are disinterested and completely unattached to the problems of France. They are also big spenders, particularly Marie Antoinette, who becomes known as Madame Deficit because of her incredible spending. And she makes Black Friday look like a slow Tuesday. I mean, it's incredible the amount of money she spends. And as an Austrian, keep that in mind. The nobility also, as the 18th century goes on, regains some lost influence. So they become more influential than they were during Louis XIV's time, particularly with the creation of the parliaments, or parlement, in France. The parliaments were courts that helped the nobility have a voice in the creation and judgment of laws, something that they had not had under Louis XIV, but the 15th and 16th are not as absolute because they don't have the political skills that the Sun King had to ensure an absolute monarchy. Now, the huge problem here, and the tipping point going forward, is that France is out of money. And Louis suggests that France taxes the nobility. Well, obviously they're going to say no, right? I mean, if you had given people Jif peanut butter for years, just giving it to them, and then they're like, well, we're going to pull that back. Or maybe they give it to you free. Now you have to pay for it. Well, people want their peanut butter. So the nobility say no. So the only solution that Louis could find was this political body, medieval political body, which had only met twice in 500 or 600 years in France called the Estates General. What the Estates General is a collection of all of these delegates that represent the three estates, okay? Clergy, nobility, everyone else. So you got a lot of clergy there, you got a lot of nobility there, and you got a lot of everyone else. But let's be honest, the only group in the third estate that would probably have the time, money, and interest to do this are the bourgeoisie, the middle class, the merchants. So you're going to have a group of them, and them. Now, the way that the voting works in this procedure is that each estate gets one vote. So you don't vote by head, you vote by collective estate. So an issue is brought forth by the king. He says, hey, we want to tax the nobility. He's going to bring it forward to the Estates General. But again, each estate only gets one vote. Now, the size of the delegation matters because the first and second estate here bring, how many delegates, but the third estate brings a whole lot of people. But again, only one vote per estate. So how do you think they're going to vote? Well, second estate, they're not going to vote for the tax increase. And you know what? The first estate probably won't either. Because if you tax the nobility, what's going to stop the king then from taxing the church to help financial situation? So they're going to say no as well. Now, you've got the third estate here, right? And they're like, but guys, come on now, right? They're out on a limb, and they're the ones that are taxed. So, of course, they want the tax burden to be shared, but how's it going to go? 1, 2, 1, 2 to 1 say no, and hey, the measure is going to fail, and there's nothing the king can do at this point. He's like, I tried. But again, Louis XVI, he's not very effective politically. He doesn't have the iron will that his, great-grandfather had, something like that, Louis XVI or Louis XIV. So the first two estates are going to work together to stop these tax increases. But then, before the Estates General closes, you have a meeting and a suggestion from the third estate that says, let's change the voting system and let's make the third estate, the second and first estate, all participants have one vote. So the change would be that everybody there gets a vote. Now, if you look at the way it's presented at the Estates General, you've got over half of the people there are representing the third estate. So you can tell me how this is going to work if the voting works like that. You're going to get all the third estate to vote one way, and that's going to be enough votes to turn the tide. So obviously the system would be something they'd like. It's funny, though, because they bring it before Louis, and they're like, we want to make this change. And Louis is faced with a choice because he'll probably get his way on the tax increases if he makes the change, but he fears giving freedoms to the third estate, and that might represent something that cuts into his royal authority. So he denies the changes. He says, no, we're not going to do this. The estates have spoken. We're going to stay with the way it is, but he doesn't change the system. Okay? Now, the third estate is kind of ticked because they have come here and are desperate for relief and for change. We have high bread prices, okay, with the drought. We have a France where taxes on the third estate are incredibly high, and they want to share that burden. Again, these are middle-class bourgeoisie that are struggling under the weight of these taxes. Well, the third estate's going to decide that, you know what, it's time for us to do something because the king won't do it, so we have to act. So the third estate, meeting at Versailles, declares itself to be the National Assembly that are going to create laws to benefit the 97% of the population that they feel are not being represented. And how they do this? I mean, it's like, we're just going to create laws. But they have the iron fortitude to say, you know what, I think 97% of the country is going to support it, and they're going to honor what we try to accomplish. Again, Louis had already given some responsibility for leading the way to the Parlement. So this is not a completely foreign concept that Louis would have a shared political actor with him. Okay? Well, Louis hears that the third estate is doing this, and he doesn't like this, especially after denying the changes. So he locks the door to the meeting room at Versailles, which is where all this is happening. Well, if only Versailles had another room where this group could go. Well, they find an indoor tennis court. Think racquetball. They find a racquetball court in which they meet. That should say, I think, I think it's on June 24th. Of 1789, by the way. All this is happening in 1789. I should have established that. Uh, so the third estate is going to meet at this tennis court at Versailles, and they're going to say, listen, we're not going to leave this room, this indoor tennis court, until we write a constitution. And that moment is called the tennis court oath. We're going to write a constitution that's going to limit the power of the king, and it's going to restore enlightenment freedoms to the people of France. And yay, it sounds awesome. You know what? This is just a very philosophically enlightenment-based, beautiful moment, and everyone's happy and yelling and waving their hands and shouting amen, and everyone's having a great time. The tennis court oath. Well, you can understand that Louis is not exactly thrilled. Okay? So he's going to need to call in maybe some troops to Versailles to help settle this down, right? Because he's afraid of what the National Assembly or the Third Estate is going to do. So he makes the decision to call up the National Guard. And to get to Versailles, many troops had to march through Paris. Now, in Paris, high bread prices, stress from high taxation, difficult living conditions. All of these things create a very stressed, urban, poor population. We're talking not peasants, right? They're not agricultural, but they live and work in the city, but they're poor. And these people are nervous because of all the conditions going on that are difficult. So as the troops are passing through Versailles, many of them say, you know what, what's going on? I mean, are we getting invaded? Right? France at war, that happens all the time. We don't know. And in a moment of desperation, the people of Paris decide we've got to find a way to defend ourselves, right? Government's not protecting us and feeding us or giving us the ability to eat, so we've got to protect ourselves. So a mob develops in Paris on July 14th, 1789, and they storm the Bastille. And what the Bastille was an old medieval prison that the king had the right to throw any person in that he did not like. And this angry mob of urban poor storms the Bastille. They overwhelm the palace guard. They murder the guard and sever his head, just for kicks and giggles. Storm into the prison, free like the 5 prisoners in there, and then steal the guns, right? And then they leave and celebrate this overturning of like a royal authority symbol, all the while getting the weapons to protect themselves. And this event is called the storming of the Bastille. Now, in the context of this revolution, what this shows is the people of Paris taking matters into their own hands. They don't feel protected because of the presence of troops. They're not fed, and taxes are very high. 1, 2, 3, all problems that the urban poor take upon themselves to fix. And they symbolically, in that moment, overturn the monarchy. Obviously, the king is still in charge, but they show the king, we're not going to sit back and take it while you sit at Versailles and not solve our problems. And the Bastille is that representation. They actually take the Bastille and dismantle it. I'm not sure they brick by brick off. They didn't burn it down or anything, but they destroyed the stone prison and show that overturning. So let's keep track here. Versailles, you've got a third estate that has taken legal authority. Paris, you've got urban poor who are storming prisons and taking guns to protect themselves and symbolically overturning the authority. But now we go to the countryside, and the peasants, oh man, I like a good peasant. Bread prices are hitting them hard as well. They hear of the unrest at Versailles, they hear the unrest in Paris, and they start acting. And across France, you get periodic pockets in the month of July 1789 of peasants roaming the countryside and causing problems. And this is called the Great Fear. What this is the peasants' attempt to storm into the nobles' houses of, paperwork and where they keep records of the debts that peasants have. And they say, you know what, nobles, you all get free of all these taxes, and we pay our taxes to you and the church and the king, and we've had enough of it, and we're going to stop this process. And in order to destroy the evidence that shows the debts that the peasants have to pay, they basically go to these places and burn everything down. Murdering aristocrats, murdering nobles, burning these documents to show that these debts cannot be paid anymore, And this event again is called the Great Fear. And what this does is starts, I mean, when they burn their documents, they're kind of happy because they can't prove they have to pay any more taxes or whatnot. But what this does is it starts to contribute to this idea that things are starting to break down. And when you can't cross Paris into the countryside and you're seeing all these things and the breakdown of law and order, it starts to give people this sense of doubt and dread. But if you're the peasants and you can kind of destroy these documents, if you participate in this, man, this is a great thing. And you really, outside of being taxed like crazy, you really aren't asking for much more than that. Oh, wait, guess what? It's here. The National Assembly, seeing the breakdown in order, is going to act when the king does not. And on August 4th, again, timeline, third estate tennis court oath was in late June. By August, the National Assembly declares the estate system, 3 estates, to be dead, to be eliminated, and that all men in France are to be considered equal under the law. What does that mean? No serfdom, meaning that peasants do not have specific debts to the nobles which they live on their land. No hunting rights. The nobles don't get the ability to go onto a peasant's area of residence and hunt without a certain payment. That had been a very medieval privilege. No corvée. The king and nobility cannot force labor of the peasant class anymore without some sort of compensation. All of these things are eliminated, but this, equal taxes for all people, a proportional tax based on your wealth, not your status. So for the nobles and the clergy, the National Assembly says you're going to have to pay up. And the peasants at this point are thrilled and satisfied, and many of them will begin to start to drop out of revolutionary activity. More on that in 7.2. Now you might ask, and it's something I wonder about too, is where is the king in all of this? Why is he letting all of this happen? Louis XVI starts to see that perhaps working with the National Assembly might not be the worst thing in the world, and he's hesitant to put a stop to the actions that they're taking, especially when they prove that they can kind of slow the Great Fear down. So it's something to consider is Louis's attitude toward all this. If you had gotten a Peter the Great or the Louis XIV or even a Charles I from England, there would have been, I think, conflict much sooner between the king and those who are looking to seize power. But Louis doesn't want to escalate the situation on his end. And that's kind of what we have. Now, everything looks great at this point, but except we have got one more problem that we haven't really addressed. And that's the problem of bread. If you remember, bread is still very high in terms of its price. So the question is now, how can the bread issue be solved? Because prices are still going up. Well, women in Paris take matters into their own hands again, and they march to Versailles, about a 20-mile walk, a march, to basically protest bread shortages. And they're not going singing church hymns. They're going with pitchforks, they're going with torches, they're going with saber-toothed tigers. I mean, they're coming for business and for blood. And these women are angry because they can't feed their kids. And when they get to Versailles, they overwhelm the palace guard. They actually kill a couple of members of Louis and Marie Antoinette's palace authority guards, and almost the angry mob gets to Marie Antoinette before she can escape inside of the palace. Who knows what would have happened then? In any case, the mob will not leave unless the king and queen return to Paris with them, presumably under arrest. And they are, the king and queen, Louis and Marie, captured, so to speak, and brought back to Paris, in which they place price controls on bread. So the government basically says, listen, stop the madness with this bread. The bread prices, we're going to set a cap on the price, and it kind of solves the situation. The National Assembly also is going to move to Paris as well. Now, what this shows you is that the mob can get what they want, right? So they can go and demand of the higher-ups, not only the king and queen, but also the National Assembly, the Third Estate, the high third estate, and they can get them to be beholden to what the people want. It's such a change. And that action, this action, really marks a transfer. Is this going to end the revolution? I mean, is this just a 3 or 4 month thing? Because think about what we've done. We've eliminated the estate system. We have created an alternative way of ruling with the king, with the National Assembly. We have freed the peasants from many of their obligations. We have satisfied the economic problems with bread. Things look decent at the end of October 1789. But this is not just a one-section unit. It's much, much more. And the changes that the National Assembly will make right after they get back to Paris are going to set the next dominoes in line. And that's the story we'll get to in 7.0.